I always thought Ethan was the smartest student in our class, until I discovered his biggest secret. Should I tell the truth or keep it hidden? This is a story about the weight of secrets and the choices that define us. Everyone in our class knew Ethan. He wasn't just a good student, he was the best. Straight A's, perfect scores, always one step ahead of the rest of us. Whenever the teacher asked a difficult question, he was the first to answer. Whenever a new topic was introduced, he already seemed to understand it. It was like he never struggled with anything. I admired him. No, maybe I envied him. I spent hours studying, but no matter how hard I tried, I could never match his level. How does he do it? I often wondered, is he just naturally gifted, or is there something I'm missing? Teachers praised him. Parents wished their kids could be like him. And other students either admired him or feared competing with him. To everyone, he was a role model, the definition of academic success. And yet, something always felt a little off. His eyes, they weren't the eyes of someone who was simply good at studying. They were the eyes of someone who carried a weight no one else could see. But I ignored that feeling. After all, Ethan was perfect, right? One day, I stayed late after school to finish a project. The hallways were quiet, and most of the students had already gone home. As I walked past the library, I noticed someone sitting alone at a table, buried in a pile of books. It was Ethan. At first, I wasn't surprised. Of course, Ethan would be studying. He was the top student, but something about the way he was frantically flipping through pages, his hand shaking slightly as he wrote, made me pause. Then I saw something I never expected. His notebook wasn't filled with neatly written notes like I imagined. Instead, the pages were covered in scribbles, words crossed out, rewritten, and crossed out again. I could see small dents in the paper, where he had pressed his pen too hard, like he had rewritten the same thing over and over. And then there were the dark circles under his eyes. I had never noticed them before, but now, under the dim library lights, they were impossible to miss. His hands moved quickly, but there was a tension in his movements, a kind of desperation. For the first time, I realized Ethan wasn't just good at studying. He was forcing himself to be. But why? What was he so afraid of? The more I observed Ethan, the more I started noticing things I hadn't before. In class, he always answered questions perfectly, but sometimes, when the teacher looked away, I caught him gripping his pen too tightly, his knuckles turning white. One afternoon, we were assigned a group project, and by chance, Ethan and I ended up in the same group. Everyone expected him to take charge, but when we discussed ideas, he was strangely quiet. He kept nodding at our suggestions, forcing a small smile, but I could see the way his fingers tapped anxiously against his desk. Then something happened that I never expected. While we were dividing tasks, one of our classmates, Liam, casually joked,
"Ethan, I bet you'll get a perfect score, even if the rest of us do nothing."
Everyone laughed, except Ethan. His face stiffened for a split second, and in that moment, I saw something behind his usual calm expression. Panic.
"Yeah, I guess,"
he muttered, forcing another smile, but his hands trembled slightly as he picked up his notebook. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Was Ethan really as perfect as everyone thought? Or was there something deeper, something he wasn't telling anyone? I never thought I'd see Ethan struggle. He was always the smartest, always in control, But that illusion started to break right before my eyes. One evening, I had to stay late at school to finish our project. As I walked past the library, I noticed someone sitting alone at a table, surrounded by open textbooks and crumpled pieces of paper. It was Ethan. At first, I hesitated. He looked so focused, his head buried in his hands. But then, he let out a deep sigh, and for the first time, I saw something I never expected. His eyes were red, like he hadn't slept in days. His hands clutched his hair, his fingers trembling slightly. I took a step closer. "Ethan?" He flinched, looking up at me with a forced smile.
Oh, Mia. I didn't see you there.
His voice was hoarse, tired. I glanced at the papers scattered across the table. Practice tests, handwritten notes, red marks circling mistakes. So many mistakes. "Are you okay?" I asked carefully. He let out a small, dry laugh.
Of course, just studying. You know? Can't afford to mess up.
Something about the way he said it sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't the usual confidence he always had. It was fear. Fear of failing. Fear of not being perfect. And in that moment, I realized Ethan wasn't just carrying expectations. He was drowning in them. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about Ethan. His tired eyes, the way his hands shook. He was barely holding it together, but no one else seemed to notice. At school, he was still Ethan, the perfect student. Teachers praised him, classmates envied him, and everyone assumed he had everything under control. But I knew the truth now. After class, I found him sitting alone behind the school building, staring blankly at his notebook. I hesitated for a moment before sitting down next to him. "Ethan, you don't have to pretend around me." He let out a soft sigh but didn't look at me.
You don't understand, Mia. If I fail, I'm nothing.
His words hit me harder than I expected.
That's not true. You're more than just your grades.
He finally turned to me, and for the first time, I saw it, the fear in his eyes, the pressure crushing him from all sides.
I wish I could believe that.
He whispered. I wanted to say something, anything, to help, but I knew that words wouldn't fix the years of pressure he had carried alone. All I could do was sit beside him and let him know he wasn't alone anymore.